You checked the listing again this morning. Same apartment, same size, $200 more than last year. You didn't move, you didn't upgrade, the walls didn't get nicer. So why does it feel like the floor keeps rising under your feet? The easy answer is inflation. Prices go up, rent goes up, that's just how money works. But that answer doesn't explain why rent has climbed faster than almost everything else you buy. Groceries went up, gas went up, rent went up more. The real reason is stranger than inflation. It has less to do with landlords and more to do with what your home quietly became, an investment product traded by people who will never live in it. Picture a woman named Elena. She's not rich. She's not desperate either. She works in logistics, makes a steady income, and for years she rented the same one-bedroom apartment in a mid-sized city. Nothing fancy, just home. Then one spring, her lease renewal arrived with a number that didn't make sense. 14% higher. She called the building manager. He apologized almost sincerely and explained that the building had been sold. New owners, new pricing model. Her home hadn't changed. Its owner had. Here's what Elena didn't know and what most renters never see. Her apartment building wasn't sold to another landlord who wanted to manage property. It was sold to an investment fund. A collection of buildings bundled together, treated less like homes and more like a portfolio of cash-generating assets. The fund didn't care about her lease. It cared about yield, and yield in real estate has one simple lever: rent. This is where the economist Robert Shiller becomes useful. Shiller spent decades studying housing prices, and one of his central findings was uncomfortable. Housing, he showed, doesn't behave like a normal market driven purely by supply, demand, and cost to build. It behaves like a market driven by narrative. When enough people believe housing is a can't-lose investment, money floods in. Not to build more homes, to buy the homes that already exist. Prices climb because belief climbs, and rent climbs to justify the belief. You feel the downstream effect of that belief every time you renew a lease. Think about it this way. When a stock goes up, you don't feel it in your daily life unless you own it. But when the price of housing goes up, everyone feels it because everyone needs somewhere to live. Owners feel wealthier. Renters feel squeezed. The same rising number means something completely different depending on which side of the lease you're standing on. So why does rent specifically outpace so many other costs? Part of it is simple scarcity. Building new housing is slow, expensive, and often blocked by local rules about what can be built and where. But part of it is something psychological, something Richard Thaler spent his career explaining. Thaler's research on behavioral economics showed that people don't treat money as one interchangeable pile. They mentally sort it into categories. Rent gets treated as fixed and non-negotiable, almost like a law of nature rather than a number a company set on purpose. Because renters mentally accept rent as unavoidable, they push back on it far less than they'd push back on almost any other rising price. Less pushback, higher prices, it's not a coincidence, it's incentive design. Now think about Elena again. She didn't fight the increase. She didn't call 10 other landlords to compare offers, the way she might compare grocery stores or phone plans. She paid it, not because she was careless with money, because moving felt like more effort than absorbing the increase, and because deep down, she'd absorbed the idea that rent just goes up. That's the belief working exactly as intended. Here's the part that reframes everything. The apartment Elena lives in isn't just a home to her. To its new owner, it's a line on a spreadsheet, competing for returns against every other place that fund could have put its money instead. Bonds, stocks, other real estate. If rent in her city isn't rising fast enough to beat those other options, the fund has one job: raise it until it does. Her home isn't being priced based on what she can afford. It's being priced based on what it can compete for, globally, against other investments entirely. This isn't new exactly. Milton Friedman argued for decades that prices are signals, information moving through a system, telling owners of capital where to put their money next. Housing became one of the loudest signals of the last 30 years, because unlike stocks, everyone needs to buy in one way or another. Either you own and the rising price benefits you, or you rent and the rising price is extracted from you 1 month at a time. So has this trend been documented, not just felt? Researchers tracking institutional ownership of single-family rentals found a clear pattern. As large investors bought up growing shares of rental housing in certain markets, rent growth in those specific zip codes consistently outpaced markets with less institutional buying, same jobs, same local wages, different pricing behavior, tied directly to who owned the building. The problem was never just supply and demand. It was who was doing the demanding and why. Elena eventually moved. Not because she found somewhere cheaper. She found somewhere slightly smaller, owned by an actual person instead of a fund, who hadn't raised rent in 3 years because, in his words, good tenants are worth more than a few extra dollars. That's not a financial strategy. That's just a different set of incentives, human ones, running the numbers differently than a spreadsheet would. Here's the twist most people miss. You don't need to become a landlord to escape this pressure entirely. What actually helps is understanding the game being played, so you stop treating every rent increase as an unavoidable fact of nature and start treating it as a number someone chose, one that can sometimes be questioned, negotiated, or avoided by choosing a different building, a different landlord, or a different city entirely. Historically, markets with more housing supply relative to demand have shown slower rent growth. Cities that allow more building tend to feel this pressure less. That's not a guarantee. It's a pattern, one worth understanding before you sign your next lease. It also helps to see your own money differently. The reason rent feels so uniquely painful isn't only that it's expensive. It's that it's one of the only major expenses you have almost no ownership stake in. Every dollar goes out, and none of it builds anything you keep. That's not a moral failing on your part. It's a structural reality of the system you're operating inside. Recognizing that difference is the first step toward deciding deliberately whether renting is a temporary bridge for you or a long-term position, and what would need to change for that to shift. None of this means renting is a mistake, or that owning is automatically the answer. Housing costs money either way, and the math depends entirely on your city, your income, your timeline, and your life. But the next time your lease renewal lands in your inbox with a number that makes no sense, remember Elena. Remember that the increase probably has less to do with the paint on your walls and far more to do with a fund somewhere comparing your rent to a bond yield. Your home became an asset before you ever got a vote. The only real power you have is refusing to treat that asset's price as fate. So the next time you check that listing and the number is higher than it has any right to be, don't just wonder where your money went. Ask who decided it should go there and whether that decision was ever really about you at all.